So now, to start off and looking at what the Walt Disney Corporation is, and then getting into what it means to be a fan of Disney, I wanted to expose everyone to a few things just to show the breadth of the Walt Disney organization. And so I think the first thing here is a picture of, I don't know why it does that. Can everyone see this? Here is from Fantasia to Frozen. This is a timeline of some of the larger releases or openings of Disney. And so you can see this yellow movie ticket. These are selected film releases. The green castle, this is when a new Disney park was open. So 1923, Disney signs Walt Disney, the person, signs a contract to produce a series of Alice comedies. The Disney Brothers Studio is founded. So these Alice comedies were really interesting because, and if you listen to the audio book I talked about last week on Walt Disney, they get into a lot of this. These Alice comedies were essentially, he would put up a white tablecloth or bed sheet, and then he would have a child actor acting out scenes in front of the white sheet. He would film that, and then he would go back, and on the white portion of the screen, he would draw his animations. So one of the first things he did is, and one of the first contracts he got, was to create this blend of animation and live action, which you see later on, especially like when Mary Poppins, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and a lot of those movies start to come out. So that was one of the first things he did. He jumps down, Steamboat Willie is created in 1928. That was really the introduction of Mickey Mouse. If you've seen that cartoon, Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. 1930, they released Flowers and Trees. This was the first full-color cartoon. And you see the first major movie was released in 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. From then, in 40, Pinocchio and Fantasia released, 41, Dumbo, 42, Bambi. The story behind Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is extraordinary. The amount of time that it took and the amount of just obsession he had with that story. For instance, the story was almost completed before they finalized the names of the seven dwarfs, because that was something that over a period of years he kept going back, and how do we name these characters? And so you see this blue line starting right here in the mid 40s. This is Disney's share price as it's shared on the market. Okay, so in the 50s, more cartoons. They also had Treasure Island. That was the first live action movie. The reason they had Treasure Island is Walt Disney wanted to show movies in England. At the time, England had a tariff on any theater production that was shown in the United Kingdom but produced outside of the United Kingdom. So he couldn't create a studio there, so he shot a movie in England so he wouldn't have to pay that tariff. So that's actually his first live action movie was created for that reason. Live action was a lot cheaper than animation. So that's why he went the live action route. In the 60s, very importantly, 1955 is when they opened Disneyland. That was the first theme park. The 60s, you see there's more animated movies. 1971, Walt Disney opens in Orlando, Florida. 1966 is when Walt Disney, the person, passed away. When he passed away, they had already announced the new property in Orlando. Bless you. But there was a lot of conversation within the corporation whether they would keep going and try to build the new theme park. His brother, Roy Disney, who, if you remember from last week, ran the financial aspects of the company, took over his role within the company. And one byproduct of that is it was originally going to be called Disney World. He insisted it be called Walt Disney World after his brother, so everyone knew he was responsible for this. And then you see in '76, U.S. Congress extends the copyright terms, meaning Disney retains exclusive rights to Mickey Mouse and other entities. As we move on into the '80s, Dumbo becomes the first Disney home video release. I'm listening to an audiobook now called Disney War. If you want to listen to some of the less maybe aggrandized version of the history of Disney, it's a very good audiobook to listen to. It's based in it starts in the early '80s when Michael Eisner was named CEO of the corporation. And before '81, when Dumbo was released, kind of the way that the Disney organization would handle their movies is they would put them into what they called the vault, and then every 7 years they would release them. Because you have to remember when Snow White was created and the early cartoons were created, a lot of people were going to movies. They were going to actual movie theaters. That's how the studio, that's how the corporation made their money, through these receipts from people going and sitting, watching the movies in actual theaters. Throughout the 50s, when television really became big, 60s, 70s, when people stopped going to the movies at the same rate they were when some of the earlier cartoons were released. And so there was a lot of discussion, and it goes into some depth within that book, Disney War. There's a lot of discussion over releasing these videos on home video. And a lot of people, some family members, took some pretty hard convincing in order to make this happen. But in 1981, Dumbo becomes their first release. 1983 was the first international park, Tokyo Disney. The Disney TV channel. So the Disney Channel was born in 1983. And then the first Disney store opens in California. So for the people who last week shared that the Disney store in Wolf Chase Mall was such a large part of their childhood, that the audiobook also goes into kind of the foundation of this and the foundation of them having brick and mortar stores. So Disneyland Paris opens in 1992. That was originally called Euro Disney, and it was wildly unsuccessful. This was really one of the first major things or products that the Walt Disney Corporation put out that was unsuccessful. Okay, so it was losing a lot of money, so they had to come up with ways on how they were going to try to control that. The Lion King was released in 1994. That was after the wildly successful Little Mermaid movie, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin. Those three movies, accompanied with The Lion King, were really seen as some of the finest movies and finest era in Walt Disney's animation studios. 1996 is when they acquired ABC, or Capital Cities. 98, Congress extended copyright terms for a second year for Mickey Mouse and other entities. And then you see 2000s, there's a lot more information here. So the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie came out in 2003. Disney purchases rights to the Muppets in 2004. 2005, Hong Kong Disneyland is open. 2006, Disney acquired Pixar for $7.4 billion. So last week, I said Toy Story was actually made without Disney's help. That's not true. I learned after class that Disney was using Pixar's animation technique to try and speed up some of their animation. So has anybody seen The Little Mermaid? Mm-hmm. The last scene in The Little Mermaid, bless you, where they're riding off and they're sailing off into the sunset, and all the mer people are waving and you can see their backs. That sunset and the scene was the first time that this new technology, which was being developed by Pixar, was used in to create an animated movie. Okay, so throughout that time, they consistently worked with Pixar to create some of the cartoons. So Disney actually did help creating Toy Story. 2006, the acquisition was finalized. 2006 was also when the first dual branded movie, Disney Pixar movie, Cars, came out. Marvel was acquired in 2009 for $4 billion. Iron Man 2 and Toy Story 3 come out in 2010. Probably one of the most successful, most popular Disney animated movies, Frozen, came out in 2013. 2012, Lucasfilm was acquired for $4.1 billion. 2015, The Force Awakens. And so you can see, if you follow the blue line, how their stocks were moving. Their stock prices were moving. And so now, if you look at it, it's about between 110 and 120 per share. Here's something else that's pretty interesting to look at. I'll show you this. So this is a article and has pictures of the 6 media empires or companies that own almost all media. So we'll scroll down so you can see Disney. So when this was created, this was Bob Iger's, the CEO's annual salary. But look at the media assets and look at the number of television and film properties that you knew Disney owned and the ones that are a little surprising to you. We typically, we think of now ABC, Disney obviously, the Disney Channel, but here's all the ESPNs, Golden Oak Ranch, here's, being a Texas fan, here's Longhorn Network because it's owned by ESPN. Marvel Studios down in the Lucasfilm, SEC Network. How many people watched, this would have, if these movies were popular in the 90s, so maybe you've seen them recently, any movies made by Touchstone?
I've seen the logo.
What's that?
I've seen the logo, but I don't know what movie.
So Touchstone was created to kind of get into the more adult themed entertainment, primarily to get away from the G ratings, from the Disney animated classics and then the family videos. So Touchstone, movies like, one that comes to mind with Robin Williams, has anybody seen Dead Poets Society? Was created under the Touchstone label. Pretty Woman was created under the Touchstone label. A lot of the, what's the Tom Cruise? I'll think about it later. A lot of the movies that were popular in the 90s, they had a lot of big hits. What?
Is it Mission Impossible?
Mission Impossible, no. I can't remember what it is, and I don't want to tell you something wrong. But so you count all of the different media, television and film entities, and then down into here, video games, and then print. And then I'll post this on eCourseWare when I get everything up and running, so you can see this as well, because it also goes into it goes into the other corporations, which is pretty interesting. Cocktail, yes, that's the one I was thinking. Since we're being recorded, I didn't want to say anything false on the camera. But yes, it was Cocktail. Here's from Wikipedia, and typically Wikipedia is a great place to start your research. Never cite Wikipedia. At the end of Wikipedia, they always give references, follow to the main reference or the original reference. It's a good place to look for things though. And one of the few places that I found just a list of all the things that Disney owns. So I'll just scroll through real quick. The Disney Theatrical Group, when they started, Beauty and the Beast was the first Disney theatrical production, like Broadway style production that they opened on Broadway. And that was seen as a major shift to theatrical and especially Broadway productions because Disney wanted to use their own, they financed the show themselves. So they didn't really have any backers on Broadway. They renovated the theater where they showed or where they put on Beauty and the Beast. They wanted to use mostly their own talent to put on the show. And so that was something that took some convincing again, but turned out to be pretty popular for and a big moneymaker for the corporation when you look at some of the older fans. Here's some of their interactive retail. And Disney parks and resorts. This one's always pretty interesting. So within Disneyland, we know there's Disney California Adventure. There's a shopping area called Downtown Disney. Walt Disney World, we typically think of Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Hollywood Studios, Animal Kingdom. There's also Disney Springs, their shopping. There's an ESPN Wide World Sports Complex. Has anyone ever been there? Up until this last year, the Atlanta Braves played their spring training games there. They have now left, so it's yet to be seen if a team is going to move into that complex. They also have 2 water parks at Disney World. And then look at the number of resorts they have. These are all in Disney World in Orlando. Each one of these uniquely themed, some of them what they call deluxe hotels, economy hotels, moderate hotels. Disneyland Paris. There they have Disney, now it's called Disneyland Paris, and they have Walt Disney Studios. Kind of like if you've been to Hollywood Studios in Orlando. Hong Kong, Shanghai, new vacation operation. So you could see down into their television, the number of, or just the reach of the Disney organization and the corporation. Pretty incredible when you think about this all starting from a person who had trouble getting financing for his Alice projects. He had contracts to do that, didn't have the money to produce those Alice cartoons. So with the time remaining, I want to kind of bring something that maybe everybody will be a little more familiar with. Has anybody heard of the Pixar theory? What's the Pixar theory?
It's basically the theory that explains how the Pixar universe in the sense of how all the movies are interconnected and how it generally all takes place, at least the one that all takes place within the same timeline.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm guessing it has to do with like when fans notice that, like, for example, in the movie Brave, there's like a statue of Sully,
Mm-hmm.
and in Monsters Inc. there's Jessie the doll, and there's like a link, and there's always like that little Pixar lamp in a lot of different other
Mm-hmm.
Pixar movies. So there's like, basically it's kind of just saying that one Pixar movie like links it to another and things like that.
So when we watch movies now and we see things that link to another movie, what do we call those? Easter eggs? Or, So, yeah, great example, the lamp from Pixar, which always serves as the eye and the Pixar logo. Also, the red, blue, and yellow ball that has a star on it appears in a lot of different movies. And so there's a Facebook page if you want to try to follow that to look at Pixar Easter eggs. Look on Facebook for Pixar Easter eggs, and they have a whole page and they create these videos every movie that comes out. So John Negroni, started writing the Pixar theory. And so if you go through, here's all the movies that are included, I think, in the current theory that he's updated. So it doesn't go through like Cars 3 or at least this list doesn't go through Cars 3 and Coco. However, if you go down here and you want to read this, I'll post this page so you can see it. Here is the full theory, okay, with links to everything. I figured it might be fun to try and watch this video. It's about 11 minutes in which he explains kind of his latest attempt at explaining the Pixar universe.
Is the center of the entire
Does everybody hear
Pixar
it?
universe. This is a true and indisputable fact that I, John Negroni, author of the Pixar theory, am about to lay out before you. But how do we get there? Where do we start? For a long time, die-hard Pixar fans have suggested that every Pixar movie might exist in a shared universe. You may have heard of the Pixar theory, which debuted in 2013 as a long-form essay that puts all of the Pixar pieces and movies together into one cohesive timeline. I'm here to share the new and improved Pixar theory with you, or some might call it the Pixar Cinematic Universe Decoded, or PCU for short. Spoiler warning, as you can imagine, we are going to have to talk about several major plot points in several Pixar movies. You have been warned.
Yes, if there are any movies that you haven't seen that you don't want to know the plot,
The most
close your
important
ears.
thing to remember about the PCU is that it's not just a string of movies with various Easter eggs and cameos. No, there's a grander story being told behind all of the Pixar movies. Maybe even intentionally, if you adjust your tinfoil hat just right.
He knows something.
Granted, it's not as if Sully from Monsters, Inc. will ever walk into a bar and tell Andy from Toy Story about the Incredibles initiative. But the PCU definitely has its own sense of purpose, as you're about to find out. Let's begin at the beginning. 65 million years ago, to be sort of exact, a meteor is hurtling toward Earth and is bound to generate an extinction-level event. Only it doesn't. We see the meteor narrowly miss a dinosaur-filled planet, thus sparking the alternate universe that is the Pixar universe, as demonstrated in The Good Dinosaur. That's right, everything you know about Pixar can be explained as the cause of a split in the timeline, Barry Allen style. The movie tells us a story of Arlo millions of years later, and here we see a world where dinosaurs are the dominant species and humans are starting to challenge them. We also see that dinosaurs aren't exactly thriving, and the planet is dealing with cataclysmic storms and a dwindling dino population. Arlo's family can barely survive with their farm. Thunderclap's gang worships storms for providing them food.
I just want to take a moment and thank the storm for this meal.
For some reason, and some dinos even collect critters to help them survive. By the time Good Dinosaur ends, it's clear that dinos are on the way out and mammals are on the rise. There's some other connections we could get into, like how these strange creatures seem to be linked to Kevin from Up, and how that might be a precursor to magic based on a drop plot point that Kevin's eggs kept Charles Muntz young, thus explaining the fantastical side of the PCU, but we just don't have the time. Fast forward to 10th century Scotland, and we arrive at one of the most critical movies in the PCU because it introduces us to the origins of what makes inanimate objects come to life. We find a witch with strange powers who can turn doors into portals, generate self-awareness in her appliances, and even give a bird the ability to talk.
Who are you? Just a humble woodcutter.
The witch from Brave is a massively important character in the PCU, and she will absolutely come to play later, but for now, let's jump to the 1950s, where superheroes roam the earth. These supers have incredible powers, pun intended, that are seemingly random. But as we'll find throughout the PCU, human potential is virtually unlimited. Our emotions can power machines. A young boy can obtain wolf-like senses, and a woodcarver can moonlight as a sorceress. In the PCU, the supers are actually humans who were experimented on by the government in order to become super spies, as evidenced by their espionage training that we see in The Incredibles, knowledge of military lingo, and how the government repeatedly takes full ownership of their role in the world.
We appreciate what you did in the old days, but those days are over.
Alas, the Incredibles eventually become the last of the supers, who are wiped out by Syndrome, and much of the world is forced to forget all about the super age, except through comic books and boxers, weirdly enough. But one other contribution from the Incredibles is the revelation of AI, as seen in the Omnidroid. And a strong case can be made that this advanced technology paved the way for a massive corporation to rise from Syndrome's ashes. That's right, by and large. A brand that is seen in multiple Pixar movies as the de facto manufacturer of just about everything. The link between AI and By and Large is revealed in the Toy Story trilogy, kicking off in 1995 and ending in 2007 with Toy Story 3, where we see that Buzz Lightyear's batteries are made by and Large. The theory goes that because the supers turned out to be more powerful than the Omnidroid, AI turns to fueling itself with human energy. Like how in Monsters, Inc., emotion is collected from children to power entire societies. By and Large has taken over the entire world.
B is for By and Large, your very best friend.
By harvesting love from humans that bring inanimate objects to life. As all of this goes on, we start to see the threads of a B-plot in the PCU, in the form of animals becoming more intelligent. In Finding Nemo, we see entire civilizations of creatures that are connected globally. Some fish like Dory are even able to read and speak other languages. In Finding Dory, it's hinted that this is because she was raised in captivity, so proximity to human emotion might have jump-started her intelligence. This is similar to how Remy from Ratatouille becomes the greatest chef in France as a result of his obsession with humans, to the point where his human mentor is a hallucination. It's his collaboration with Linguini and willingness to become more integrated with human society that we see Remy and his fellow rats flourish. And great advancements are being made for animals in movies like Up, where dogs are given collars that allow them to communicate with humans.
Impossible.
This reveals that animals are incredibly intelligent and capable of running the world as if they were humans. They can fly planes, cook meals, carry out military operations, and plenty more. In our main plot about humans being batteries, we get an even clearer glimpse at how and why human emotion is so powerful through Inside Out, a movie that reveals some emotions are more potent than others. In Monsters, Inc., we know that laughter and joy is more powerful in children than fear, and this is realized through Joy's dominance of Riley, a character who might have had an experience with the monster as a young child, just after the monsters became comedians instead of scares. Yes, Bing Bong, with all of his weird monster-like qualities, was an imaginary friend based off of a real monster that visited Riley at the same age as Boo from Monsters, Inc. So in a way, Bing Bong lives on. Anyway, we now move to when the PCU reaches its most dramatic change, the end of the world, for a while. According to Wall-E, By and Large takes full control of the planet, even its governments, which leads to overpopulation and pollution. So in 2105, By and Large puts all humans on executive starliners that are powered by human energy to the point of an infinite loop. Their plan is to clean up the Earth in 5 years by incinerating all of the garbage collected by various Wall-E units. And they accomplish just that, sort of. See, we know that in 2110, exactly 5 years later, By and Large realizes that incinerating all of this garbage has led to enormous toxicity in the air, so they have to officially evacuate.
Do not return to Earth. Repeat, do not return to Earth.
All but a few cities, like the one we see in Wall-E, are technically clean. For the next 700 years, humans are gone, and even animals are hard to find for a while, but rising up to take their place are the cars. These machines, like the toys in Toy Story, come to life and carry on. But without humans around, they need a purpose again, so they take on the personalities of their previous owners and try to recreate the human experience for themselves. This works for a while, but without actual human energy, they eventually die out from a lack of resources, as alluded to in Cars 2 with the oil crisis. And Cars 3 confirms that in a strange way, cars do age and pass on. You know, that kids movie. Sometime later, the actual events of WALL-E take place, and we learn that the Earth has been livable for a while.
I don't think they've changed. We've got to go back.
But the Starliners have been actively choosing not to return. But with Eve's help, WALL-E manages to save the Axiom and return humans to their home planet. And the clock is reset. We see that birds, fish, and insects are back in action. There's reason to believe that insects are farther along than most, as we see that a cockroach has survived as WALL-E's friend. For this reason, it seems bugs have a more evolved role in this new world as we see it in A Bug's Life. Unlike the other Pixar movies with animals, the insects have entire cities, circuses, and Flick is even an inventor of advanced machinery that benefits their society. Now, what happens next isn't 100% clear, but it isn't pretty. We see the signs of an animal takeover. Humans have been gone too long, they've gotten soft, while animals have progressed in their absence. They eventually take over the Earth in full and start their own monster world. But they run into the same problem the cars did. Without humans, where do they get their energy? To prevent another apocalypse or crisis similar to the Good Dinosaur, the monsters use their advanced technology to travel back in time through doors. This way, they can harvest the energy of children, starting in 1313 with the invention of Monsters University. To prevent problems with messing up the timeline, they keep the time travel a secret, and instead tell monsters that the human world is incredibly toxic. Now, you might think we've reached the end of the PCU, but there's still one last hanging thread. Boo from Monsters, Inc. This is a character who walked into the monster world as a child and built a relationship with Sully, who would eventually have to stop visiting her. But his decision to come back at all will be enough to fuel Boo's search for him later. Remembering the power of the doors, Boo goes on a quest to figure out how she can travel in time herself and will ultimately become the witch from Brave. That might sound like a wild guess, but there's too much evidence to support it. In the witch's workshop, we see a carving of Sully. We know that the witch is obsessed with bears, and that's one of the last things that she associated with Sully. And her workshop is filled with references to other points in time. There's a Pizza Planet truck, a Renaissance painting, too many things to count. She even says that she's going to a Wickerman festival in her cauldron.
I'm off to the Wickerman Festival in Stonehenge.
Which wasn't even invented until 2001 when Monsters, Inc. came out. Look it up. And of course, we know that she uses doors in Brave, like how they're used in Monsters, Inc. So what is the end game of the PCU? What is this all leading toward? Well, the monster world still faces a huge problem. Eventually, they will run out of children to harvest energy from because the Earth will be evacuated all over again. The witch is the only person we've seen in the PCU with the power to save everyone because she can control time and see what happens before it happens. So I guess in this case, she's the one who'll have to find Mr. Incredible and tell him all about the Sully Initiative. And that, for now, is the Pixar Cinematic Universe. Until Coco, Incredibles 2, and Toy Story 4 come out in the next few years, we'll just have to wait and see what other secrets are lurking in our favorite Pixar movies. If you're itching for more or are confused by half of what just happened, be sure to check out the full Pixar Theory book, which covers all the details, Easter eggs, and theories we didn't have time to mention in this video, including answers to who is Cinder really working for? How does Andy know Carl and Ellie? What's the deal with those Pizza Planet trucks? And that tree that shows up all the time? And these two trailers? And a whole lot more.
So, pretty cool that somebody took the time to do all of this, put all of this together. So, when we talk about Disney and the corporation, we talked about its reach, its breadth, the things that it owns, just to kind of give you this view of how massive it is. Next time is when we'll start talking about what the corporation is, and we'll start with the history of Walt Disney himself and move throughout the rest of the semester down that path. Any questions? All right. Oh, one question. Hold on.
The assignment that you were talking about at the beginning of class, when is that due?
We'll talk about it next week. I'll put due dates and everything to them. Have a good week, everyone. Thank you.